Welcome to the Western Bell podcast series, with talks on traditional spiritual teaching and its application in the world today. The intention of the series is to offer something useful for those who are drawn to study themselves and engage practice on the spiritual path. New talks are posted twice each month. The content of the talks is for informational purposes only, and not to provide any kind of counseling, medical, or professional advice. This podcast is titled Irritation, It's a Godsend. The talk was given by David Herz on August 2nd, 2025 via Zoom. David is a spiritual practitioner who lives in Paris, where he has been a journalist, technical writer, communications officer, and an English instructor at universities. In this talk, he describes his own experience with irritation, ways of working with it, and how it can be used as food for transformation on the spiritual path. David observes that people may provoke discomfort or irritation in us, but that this reaction may be about our own issues that we project onto others. He refers to The Joy of Sacrifice, a book by the Fourth Way teacher E.J. Gold, and to the way a teacher, such as his master Lee Loswick, provided irritation for others to see things in their unconscious. He notes that if the oyster was never irritated, there would never be a pearl. If there is benefit in this talk for you, please consider sharing the link to it or writing a review on social media or on one of the podcast platforms. David Herz.
Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. And really happy to share this topic with you. Irritation. I'll begin by reading its etymology: excite, provoke, and anger. The earliest characterization I heard of myself, we were living in Brazil, and someone told my mother, "Você tem menino bravo." She heard the word bravo and she thought that meant brave. You've got a brave boy. But no, it means you've got an angry boy. And I was all of 4 years old. So I was angry from way back. What exactly was I angry about? Can a baby, a very small child, be irritated? Is irritation proper to children? I don't know. I think irritation seems to have an older tinge to it. So in any case, it's something that I realize has characterized me. And I noticed that my grandfather, who was born in Russia, was very, very often angry. And I said to myself, well, I guess it's genetic. Then I realized, no, it's not genetic. It's something that I can work on, because the expression of irritation when it becomes anger is destructive of the space, it's destructive of relationships, and it's hurtful to everyone around you. So my wife, my second wife, made it clear. My first wife tried that this was not acceptable. And so I worked on it. And my daughter has helped me advance tremendously. I have a 17-year-old daughter. And when you try to control a 17-year-old daughter, you can only expect so much. And then I realized that far more effective, when she did things which irritated the hell out of me, I would just keep my voice extremely calm, speaking to her as I'm speaking to you now. And it's so much more effective if she could hear me. There was no irritation in my voice. There was earnestness. I would say, I'm your father. I'm not your servant. Please don't speak to me this way. And this is very effective. Now, it's wonderful for me to be able to do this. It took literally 20 years of work to get there. So when I was researching this topic and writing about it, I realized that most of the time we are not irritated. One of the many stories about someone who goes to see my teacher, Lee Loswick, and says, I'm angry all the time. And so Lee will look at him and say, are you angry now? And the person will say, well, no, I'm talking to you. And Lee will say, see, well, that's not your essential nature. So indeed, I don't think irritation or anger is my essential nature. And most of the time, things are going smoothly. Well, whenever I have expectations about things, whenever I project the way I expect things to happen, invariably, the reality falls short of my expectations. And it's not that I can prepare myself for it, but I can remain receptive. So when the thing happens that disappoints or irritates me, I can tell myself, oh, it's a reality check. If it's a major source of irritation, then it's a major reality check. But this isn't good enough. I mean, this isn't what happens straight off. So one of the things that I asked myself is because I was so constantly irritated when I'm driving, when I'm walking in the street, when I'm taking public transport, when I'm talking to my children. What can I do about it? How can I use this? How can I use something which is extremely frequent in my life to make my life a better place? And in so doing, improve that of the people around us. So my teacher, Lee Loswick, was irritated at how things are turning out, how people are behaving, how much there is to be disappointed in with our fellow humans. My major source of irritation these last few years, an immense source of irritation, fury, and rage, has been what Israel's doing in Gaza. And my very simple analysis of the situation is that fundamentally, I find that I am just totally against killing other human beings. This is astounding. I just don't think it solves very many problems. And this is my argument. You know, people would come up to me with facts and history. It's so irritating, all these bloody facts, this history that I don't need and that I know anyway. And so I say, look, how about if we stop killing people? Isn't that a wonderful argument? I find that a very difficult argument to counter. So that's my major source of irritation these last few years. So for me, irritation is the canary in the coal mine. There are at least two major forms of it. For example, it starts in the stomach, goes to the head, your full-throated expression of irritation. For example, I theorize that Adam, he was irritated with Lilith. That was God's first choice. And he complained to God, and God gave him Eve. And Lilith went on less than illustrious career to become the mother of demons, which kind of supports Adam's claim that she might have been hard to live with. You never know. So, irritation goes way back to the first couple. We don't have much about Eve being irritated with Adam, but, it's kind of a sexist version of things. And I realize that irritation, or the irritated state, it's a gift. Why is it a gift? Because once you recognize it's there, the energy immediately goes elsewhere. In other words, if you allow irritation to go farther than that prickly, annoyed feeling and become anything from rage to sullenness to like clamped jaw fury, then you've lost the gift. In German, gift means poison, the word gift, and in Swedish, it means marriage. But isn't that interesting that gift can be considered poison? And indeed, a gift ill-received and badly used in a relationship can become a source of poisoning. So recognition of its presence, of the presence of irritation, is a fantastic way to hold the energy and let it go elsewhere. To prepare for this talk, some of the things I did was to interview people. I asked them their opinion about irritation, what they thought of it, whether or not it was important to them. Now, as I said, one form of irritation begins in the stomach and rises to the head, and you give expression to it. There are other forms of irritation that result when you're tired or when you're hungry. The implication being that when you're tired, you have less awareness or less control. The same goes with being hungry. I noticed that I was irritated when I'm hungry. So that's interior. That's not something from outside coming to rub you the wrong way. Because the things from the outside, there's an infinite panoply of possibilities of irritation. People asking us to repeat what we've said, making unnecessary remarks, asking us to do things, and so on and so on and so on. So the questions I asked about irritation, I said, what do I do when I feel it? Do I give free vent to it? Do I control it? Is it useful? Do I have examples? Is it useless? Can I help others with their irritation? Is there something that I can extract that will always be of use to me? When is it clearly bad, a state of constant irritation? And, of course, the fact that others are obliged to coexist in your sphere of irritation. What do you do with this? When has your irritation become irritating for all and everything around you? Does this happen? How do you know when this is real and not just more self-unkindness? So, one of the easiest ways that I and others perhaps are irritated is when our comfort is threatened. And this is The Joy of Sacrifice, a great book by Mr. Gold. And sacrifice one is the sacrifice of comfort. And it implies a life of austerity. Apparently, it's a big deal. I believe that I'm speaking in this sort of universal I, like I, to sacrifice or compromise our need for comfort is what's going to lead to, the end of the species. And I think that the hardest thing for anyone to accept is the sacrifice of comfort. And if you really want to irritate someone, you get them to change their habits. You get them to have to sacrifice what they would consider their comfort. Like a little anecdote of Gurdjieff. He had a woman who was very interested in the work. And so one day he wanted to get her to understand just how serious she was or was not about working. And he says, well, look, tomorrow I want you to come to the meeting without your makeup. She couldn't do it. She could not sacrifice this thing which made her comfortable, this habit of hers. So too bad. That's just the way it is. Now, I interviewed, among others, Tom, and he said, it's all discomfort. He's assuming a tremendous amount of responsibility in this. I was at my brother's house in Washington, and he's done much better than I have in this material world. He has a wonderful house. It was such a pleasure to be so well housed. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm going to have to go back to my Parisian hovel when this is over. But I was deeply grateful. And I kept reminding myself, remember, this isn't exactly illusion, but it's not going to last all that long. You're going to have to go back to Paris, where you're going to have to run the vacuum cleaner and clean the kitchen all by yourself. So I was very thankful for that. I was thankful for my whole American stay, 3 weeks. It was wonderful seeing relatives and friends in New York and Philadelphia. I hadn't been back in 6 years. So another group said, and I'm often looking for help. She said, for the comfort of others that show that they care. In other words, I need reassurance that what I'm doing, that what I'm asking to maintain my comfort, to prevent myself from becoming irritated, is justified. And then Tom, he brought up the idea of conscious sacrifice. And one of the elements of conscious sacrifice is wonderful from E.J. Gold, who said one of the hardest things in the work is not responding to others' unpleasant manifestations. This is a wonderful test to see how irritated you feel when someone is being their usual self, which in your scheme of things is like an incarnation of pure irritation. My God, he's doing it again. My God, doesn't he ever learn? My God, he thinks I'm going to lend him the car again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's often misunderstood. It doesn't mean that you just accept everything that comes along. Not at all. You do speak up. But there are social and other situations when it's obvious that speaking up is just going to make things worse. So you just lump it and roll with it. And it's a tremendous effort for me. And in any case, the universe is always conspiring to give us catastrophic work opportunities. Because when everything is going well, once again, and I'm feeling really serene, like this close to a change of context, I swear I can feel it. I can feel like angels are humming in the wings. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, something horrible happens. The cat gets sick or my daughter disappears and she doesn't tell me where she is. And then everything falls apart because I had given myself one of those juicy narratives which reality refuses to fulfill. One of the ways that Tom has for treating this, he said he likes to invoke prayer in the middle of the night. And one of the prayers that he shared was to give up the idea that there's something wrong with me, that I'm not good enough for God, which I think is a wonderful prayer. In other words, yes, these really crappy things are happening to me. I have all kinds of problems. I'm inept or inapt in certain ways, in certain places, but here I am. I accept it. And I will take a look. Yes, I will. I don't accept it blindly. I'm going to work at this. And anyway, it's not my chief feature. As we know, chief feature is so much deeper. The chief thing that's ruining my life. Madame de Salzman said, individuals have work to do, not people. In other words, everyone out there, it's not my business. They provoke discomfort and irritation. Well, I think they do. At least that's my reaction. But the work is right here. Oh, it's in my wonderful boundaries. So another person I interviewed, he described it as a state in which so many ideas are flying around in his head. And he's asking himself what he's going to do about it. He considers it to be a trigger, this irritation. In other words, the immediate response is, I need to make that person wrong. It doesn't match my reality. But then he said, well, since he's a guy who tends to think about what's going on with him, it's something in my past is being triggered. He's very aware of his habits. He says the really important way to deal with irritation is to be aware of your habits. For example, when I was in the United States, I was able to observe close up the habits of my friends and relatives, which I will not allow any psychiatrist to characterize. They have names for all of these behaviors, which are not really very interesting. And so, I just sort of observed and didn't say anything. It's not necessary, but it's interesting to see just how powerful and how controlling these reflexes are in every situation. For example, the dishwasher must be arranged in a certain way. The dishes to be prepared for the dishwasher must not be rinsed because I might end up using more water in the sink than the dishwasher is going to use. Then my ecological karma will send me straight to green hell. It's very complicated, these calculations. Well, I'm sure I've got some really irritating habits as well, like maybe being happy all the time. I'm sure that drives a lot of people crazy. So he also said that he allows these feelings to happen because he notices that he's becoming more sensitive and more vulnerable. And that's why more irritation show up. I'm allowing it to happen. I allow myself to be irritated. Denial is the worst thing I could do. There's a kind of trigger that shows up everywhere until I get to the source. What is the source for the trigger for the irritation? And in general, it comes up to the same thing. It's I'm not good enough, not worth being loved. And you get a handle on where it is that it enters. It's encountering something inside that causes the outside to be a trigger for irritation. If only life were simpler. And anyway, he says it's useful. I get to see something I didn't know about myself, which I did not go to the source of. So can we pretend to go to the source of things? I don't think so. But I think we can come up with some pretty useful explanations for what it is that's triggering the irritation. I consider all of this food, wonderful food, 24/7 food. And it doesn't stop. But how it's received evolves. So I also interviewed a body, and she can give free vent to it. For example, she's driving in her car and nobody's with me, so she just screams at the top of her lungs just to get rid of it, and gives free vent to her irritation, just lets it out. But then there's, of course, that very intimate situation filled with people, and it might come out directly, this irritation in a group. So these are two very distinct situations, alone and with people. And then when the irritation arises in the group, then she says, I think something's wanting to be said. I'm not going to quash it. I'm going to go through what skillful means I have and let the space hear what I have to say or feel. maybe this can, as she said, open a door to a solution of the situation. She says, useful irritation is so existential. It's not great. I will not explain that phrase. And then, of course, if she realizes that the expression that she's about to give to irritation is an invasion of, I quote, her intrinsic dignity or health, mental as well as physical, then she stops it. Useless irritation is almost all the time triggering my ego, or just adding to the mostly already ongoing chaos caused by mental delusion or blunt absence of kindness and compassion. The greatest work we can do on the path is to show kindness and compassion to others. She's done a lot of study of the body and of plants and things like this. And he says, our survival mechanism reacts at the speed of a 1/200th of a millisecond, something really fast. So from the irritation to the first answer of the limbic system, this is somewhere in your brain, to catch that, well, you can't. In other words, it's felt in you. What you can catch is its outward expression. The speed of irritation is like human light speed. And of course, if you do express yourself unjustly or unkindly, she says, I can and do apologize sooner or later. But first of all, I have to clarify myself, where the physical sensation of irritation is leading me, to my head or to my gut. If it's in your gut, that's a pretty solid confirmation that it's worth investigation. If it's in your head, well, you know about your head. So, an example that happened to me, I was at the airport in Washington quite a number of years ago, and I had a panic attack on my way to the airplane. So I said to myself, wait, where is this coming from? Is this coming from my head or from my guts? So I realized, it's coming from my head. The plane won't crash. So I went, took the plane, didn't crash. God bless the gut. She said that in order to make body and brain work together all right, you need relaxation. So somehow you have to make a call out to yourself to relax. One way is to wriggle your toes. Wriggling your toes is extremely effective in practically any situation. Even if you're getting like a traffic ticket, you won't say anything stupid to the policeman.
Listening to your interviews with people, I can't help but wonder if you considered interviewing us here in real time as part of the experience.
Sure, thank you. That's an excellent suggestion. It's slightly irritating, but not very.
Can I make it more irritating?
Sure, go for it.
I would like to hear what some people here have to say about those very same subjects.
That'd be great. Okay. All of you agree to that? Okay. I don't know if anyone would like to speak up now. Please do. Among the questions is, what do I do when I feel it? Do I give free vent to it? Do I control it? Is it useful? Do I have examples? Is it useless? Can I figure out a proportion of useful and useless? Can I help others with irritation? Is there something to extract from the sensation of irritation that will always be of use to me? That it be a warning, a canary in the coal mine, something telling me what is happening before it does, something that gives me more time to orient myself and act. When is it clearly bad? A state of constant irritation? When has your irritation become truly irritating for all and everything? Does this happen? How do you know this is real and not just more self-unkindness? In other words, that you're telling yourself, God, I'm such a terrible person. I'm always irritated and everyone hates me, with just like not necessarily true at all. Because you might ask someone afterwards and you say, God, I'm sorry that I was so irritating. And they'll say, I don't know what you're talking about, which has happened to me. So those are the questions.
So I'm experiencing something that was irritating me, and in that my connection kept faltering and frying out. So finally, I just left where I'm sitting now. Anyway, that was an irritant. So I came back into here, and here I am now. So it seems to be working now. But as I was observing what was going on, my first question seems to be, do I really need to be reactive about this right now? Or can I do something about it? Applying what's learned to life situations, which I find very affirming somehow. What I have learned by being a spiritual student, I'm given tools to work with. And this is a really great one. I was in a group, I can't remember what we were talking about, but I wrote down, when things are going swimmingly, I revert back to my old habits. I revert back to my mechanism, my mechanical body and my body of habits. And basically, I just go back to sleep again. And I find that a very useful reminding factor. So when I feel irritation, am I able to remember to be irritated and to use it as a reminding factor of work, which I wish to do? So I particularly like phrases like your phrase of more self-unkindness. So those kinds of phrases, which I take to be very specific language about what it is that you're talking about, I find that very, very useful to remember those more self-unkindness, because I know that one quite well. Anyway.
When things are going well, celebrate, but remain aware. I love the examples from the world of corporations. Do you remember a company called Nokia? Nokia, they control 40% of the cell phone market at the top of the world, and they didn't pay attention, and they disappeared. You can celebrate and pay attention at the same time. It sounds a bit neurotic, but just celebrate joyfully and pay attention, because I think feeling joy is not incompatible with paying attention. But when things are going swimmingly and you're not paying attention, then that's dangerous. But what does paying attention mean? Because I think that there's an idea that it's some kind of a constriction of your vision, some kind of attention that needs to be exercised, and that would be exhausting. I don't think that's quite it. And also, what often happens to me now is when I see irritation arising, it makes me laugh. I hope that that's constructive. Why? Why does it make me laugh? Well, because here you go again, you sneaky devil, you. My God. But it's real. It's completely real. Remember, it's faster than the speed of human light. It arises someplace real. I'm laughing and smiling, not because I'm making fun of it, because I'm recognizing its presence, but I'm certainly not going to let that energy express itself in the space negatively.
This is a great opportunity to share something sent me a while ago. 8 verses for training the mind by Geshe Langri Trungpa, 1024 to 1123. So time-tested information here. And it's about just what you were talking about, the expression of negative emotions. That's something I've been working with in my own life. It's one thing to have them, you're going to have them, but the choice to express or not to express a negative emotion. Anyway, I won't read you all 8 verses, but I'll read you 2 of them. In all actions, may I closely examine my state of mind, and the moment a disturbing emotion or negative attitude arises, since this may cause harm to myself and others, may I firmly face and avert it. And then the second one, whenever I meet people of unpleasant character, or those overwhelmed by negativity, pain, or suffering, may I cherish and care for them as if I had found a rare and precious treasure, difficult to find.
I remember teaching retired people at the Institut Catholique, the Catholic Institute in Paris. And one of my students, she was a retired lady in her early 80s, and she was total doom and gloom, extraordinary. I did find her presence extremely precious. Why? Because she reminded me of a place I did not want to be. And she reminded me of a state that I didn't want to express. And so I did everything I could to communicate with her and to encourage her. And it was just no sweat off my back. It was a pleasure. It was easy to do, but it was extraordinary because, you realize that if this can lighten her load in the slightest, great. If not, such as it is. I could imagine the effect this must have on her family, those who live with her. It's an awful lot to carry. So we all did everything we could to cheer her up. Cheer her up. I don't think that's correct. It's more like to take these strands of negativity and decorate the room with them, add shining colors to the energy. Because I don't really expect to cheer her up. Gosh, come on, it's a great life. Why are you unhappy? No, but the energy's there. The energy's very powerful, and we can do something with that. So I was very thankful for her presence. And had a student, also a retired gentleman of some means, who was a fanatic. It was extraordinary to have him in the class. And I would counter with facts. Oh my God, what's wrong with me? The utter uselessness of it all. But, you know, that wonderful saying, you may have either be right or remain in relationship. So I preferred to remain in relationship. So I made sure that there was no animosity there, and there was no vindictiveness in any of this arguing. And we remained in relationship. His presence in the space was a bit disturbing to people at times, but in the end, it was actually like a breath of fresh air.
I was thinking of another, maybe we might call it another level of irritation. When you're reading from The Joy of Sacrifice, there is the sacrifice of peace of mind.
Yes.
And according to E.J. Gold, that comes about when one really comes in contact with what he calls, or Gurdjieff called, the work. That sacrifice of peace of mind is definitely an irritation. And that level of irritation, as far as I can tell, will never go away because it's something that you cannot resolve.
Yes, it's sacrifice of peace of mind, sacrifice of comfort. Irritation is the common sensation, I think.
Yeah, so that level or type of irritation doesn't come from outside. It's totally internal. Doesn't rely on external circumstances for it to be there.
Yeah, it requires our observation also. In other words, you realize, what's disturbing me? Can you give us an example that comes to mind for you?
Well, I'm not sure I have an example other than the idea that this dilemma of incarnation is not something that I can resolve. So there's what we might call transformation. And then there's also what we might call getting better. So what I think he's referring to in that level of discomfort, that level of irritation around, sacrifice of peace of mind has to do with transformation. But so much of what we consider irritation and managing it and dealing with it, it's just about becoming better, which is nice for other people who you happen to interact with. But on the other hand, for me, irritation is neither good nor bad. It's not necessarily something that I feel I have to do something about. It's just there. Most of the time, I'm mostly annoyed.
Yeah, does irritation have a function?
Doesn't seem to. Not any more than like joy does. I don't know if joy really has a function. It's just experience.
How do you separate irritation from annoyance?
I don't. They're the same thing. I think for some people, irritation comes up as really being physically agitated. For me, it's just more like a low-grade, constant irritation. It's annoying. It's like having sand in your shoes, that kind of thing. It's just annoying.
Yeah, you really said it. I mean, I feel that way myself. The primal irritation is being pissed off to be here. And all that's entailed. Things not going my way, stupid people all around me not feeling up to par, whatever it is.
I think for me, it all has a function, a definite function. If I'm willing to be with it, to really be with that irritation. For me, irritation is really anger. It's anger. And anger, as some of us have been taught, is really a way into making clearer distinctions and gaining clarity. Recently, I had an experience where someone came to my home. I'm a new resident in a new neighborhood. My neighbor drove up to my house and got out and said, basically, I have proof that you've been calling animal control on us and have been doing it repeatedly, and they have told us that you've been doing this. And I had no idea what she was talking about. And so I just tried to be of some consolation in that it wasn't me. I haven't done it. I don't do that kind of a thing to my neighbors. I try to get along with my neighbors, and that was my response. But the irritation grew afterwards. And I told her, I said, I need to get to the bottom of this because it's not true about me. And so the irritation, I stayed with it for like 3 days while I talked to animal control. I talked back and forth with her a little bit. And it taught me, this irritation actually informed me as to what I needed to do. Some people were saying, family members saying, just let it go, don't worry about it. But that wasn't what was going to work for me, to just let it go. I needed to know the truth of the matter. And this woman was actually lying to try to scare me if I was the person calling on her, that I wouldn't do it anymore. And she even said, none of this happened before you moved in the neighborhood. And so actually, after 3 days, I was able to articulate exactly what the truth of the matter was after pulling in all the research and be able to say to her, I want to be a good neighbor. I don't want any trouble. I don't want to make any trouble. But I do need to let you know that if you ever come to my home and falsely accuse me of anything, I will need to take further action. And it was the right thing to do. It was the boundary that needed to be made for me in a new neighborhood. And I feel like I handled it in the best way possible. Did it give me deeper insight into what was coming up for me during all of that? A little bit. But what was new for me was not just letting it go, but actually taking it to the end of the road in terms of having it resolved in the best way I knew how. And so I think it's important to trust the instinct of a situation and to trust myself to know what to do so that I can feel safe if I feel like there has been a wrong committed relative to me, so that I can defend against that in a healthy way without just lashing out at someone, but really just speaking to them about what the truth is.
That sounds like an ideal way to treat irritation in the real world.
I'm going to come from kindness, because the more I work with this situation, the more I realize that it was their fear. I can find kindness and compassion on some level for what fear they must have been feeling about somebody reporting them to a city organization. I told her that I would like to continue to be friendly. Let's put this behind us and just move forward and live peacefully and coexist in our little neighborhood.
Regarding constant irritation, that's a good sign. That means that essence is exposed. EJ said that he's always irritated, and that's because you're no longer buffered. So I wanted to put that out. And then, well, I think that there's a lot of flavors. We use 1 or 2 words to cover something that has a lot of flavors. Anytime I get upset, anger, any of those flavors, that's always a sign of going inside and going, what is it that you're identified with? Or what is it you're not looking at about yourself? So often, for me, it's about something I don't want to see in myself that I'm projecting out with someone else. So whenever I have that happen, you're saying it's a gift, because I have an opportunity to see more, learn more about myself. Then I'm thinking irritation is okay. The story that comes after it, that kind of irritation. You do something, like I spill things, drop things in the kitchen on a pretty regular basis. I don't generally have any reaction to it, But I used to have, oh, you idiot. That's not useful.
I'm still at, you're such an idiot stage. I'm still at that stage, unfortunately. I'm working on it. But it's true that the longer you do this work, the more vulnerable you become and the more susceptible to irritation. Now, what you do with it, the more you work, the more it can be usefully held. But teachers such as Lee made it quite clear that he was holding a lot, that he was seeing a lot.
What is the source of irritation? I think you asked that or said something like that. And for me, when I think about that, irritation says to me that I'm not accepting what is as it is. It's not like something I have to fix, but it's a reminder, as has been mentioned, for work on self. And for me, working on self has to do with surrendering to the situation, including the irritation. One of the things that was an irritant for me, I mean, I try to hold that in a very light way, is wanting our intention or the intention of whatever group has assembled for the evening to be to consider a topic in a way that includes everybody. How to present that to people who are wanting to get a sense of how to work with these things, who are on a different path.
Or who are not on a path at all. As I said, and to see someone who's constantly in a state of fury, rage, irritation, they're suffering. And I would be really happy to alleviate as much as I could that suffering. And they're perhaps not at all interested in examining their behavior. The fact that they are suffering, screaming, yelling, being unpleasant, being irritated, being enraged, they have absolutely no intention of changing that given.
People like that wouldn't come to a talk like this, probably.
Well, yeah, they wouldn't, but they are in your life. So, for example, my grandfather, in one of his rages, threatened to disinherit me. I said, spend your money, please. And I was only an adolescent at the time, so it must have been sincere. But in other words, there was nothing I could do to alleviate his suffering that I could figure out. But I would really like to do what I can to lessen that kind of suffering. Being one of the strongest exemplars of it, because as I said, I'm not being unkind to myself. Being irritated, being pissed off was occupying a sizable portion of my daily life, really was. I think thanks to the work, I realized that there were other places for that energy. And one of those places is, in fact, joy. Instead of expressing itself in irritation, the energy can come out as joy, which is great. I hope to patent that and have a great career. Lee was often throwing out irritation in public venues. And there are many examples of this. He was giving a talk in Belgium, and he began the talk by saying, you know, your chocolate's pretty mediocre. And a quarter of the room walked out. So this is probably designed to irritate a few people. And in Paris, people walked out. They wanted to be reimbursed because this guy can't be a spiritual teacher. He's selling things. And also during his concerts, he would be quite vociferous, really addressing people. When he was doing Sympathy for the Devil, for example, he would make the lyrics clear that he was talking to you. And irritation was a really important part for me of the way that he communicated. What may appear as irritation to others is like food.
First, you were talking about alleviating the suffering of others. And then you were talking about Mr. Lazowick. The way he presented in different situations is intentionally irritating people. And yet at the same time, I would say people like him, their only interest is in alleviating the suffering of others. But I think it's very common to think of alleviating the suffering of others as, oh, yes, everything's fine, and making sure their auras are smooth and everything's patted down really nice. And You're not confrontive with them because you don't want to upset them. And that is leading to alleviating their suffering. And it might not be.
Yeah, I don't think it is personally. Yeah.
Yeah, I was also thinking that, no matter what Lee said, the transmission was going to be full throttle. And that is always what came through and landed. I was in India one time and he was giving a talk, and he was doing everything in his power to offend different people. Yet the spirit of the space, the buoyancy of the space, the acceptability of the space was allowing all that to be held very beautifully, even though some people could have been very much irritated and upset by some of the things. The transmission was coming through more powerfully than the antics that were being played out. That's one of the things that I miss. I miss that very much with him being gone now, is being in one of those kinds of spaces.
What a gift and what work. Some of the talks that I attended, I still remember them and they still work with me because I'm wondering, Jesus, was he talking about me? Uh-oh. When I was translating for him, I was amazed. I would listen, obviously, to translate. Then I would look at the crowd and I was saying, my God, he's like really lambasting them. And no, something else was happening. He knew what he wanted to say in the space. It's not like he wanted to please the space or the group to like go in the direction their hair parts. No, he was like saying what he felt he had to say in the space. It was memorable. Obviously, when he was in his space in one of his ashrams where he was the master, he could say anything and we would just die laughing. But it wasn't just anything. I mean, not for me, but it was tremendous liberty of expression, extremely rich. He says irritation is a valuable thing, okay? If the oyster was never irritated, there would never be any pearl. And when we enter the path, we do not see things clearly. We are not very sensitive as we grow and our work deepens. It's not that there are more and more problems or that we are creating difficulties. It is that we see things that were always there, but we were unconscious of them up until now. Also, using public spaces during musical concerts. Lee started at least 5 different bands, sung in or wrote the lyrics for, and to use public space was a form of wonderful irritation for me and for a lot of people.
Well, does that apply now? Is that something that should intentionally be engaged with others? Or is that beyond our pay grade? And telling stories about things that happened remind us of something useful for now?
I think that irritation is useful in practice. Be that which nothing can take root in. Sounds extremely noble. You can say like, hey, don't get pissed off at everything. This energy that arises, again, at this incredible velocity in us, it literally, for me, four-dimensionally describes, because it's going through time, our fiber, the fiber of our existence is expressed in the nature of our irritation, because each of us will manifest and feel it personally. Something is being said about our very, very deep structure, which we will accept and we will not try to change. Remember that one? The harder you try to change it, the stronger it gets. I'm very thankful for it. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation. It is extremely nourishing for me.
Well, I kind of thought that part of the idea was to get beyond irritation.
No, absolutely not.
That irritation, in the same way that I experience it, might somehow become something else if I was with that entirely and saw what the source of that was and saw through that. So you would disagree with that?
Oh, yeah, because it's so fast and it's like this little pinprick, but I don't let it express. I don't let it become the classic irritated David, who's like going to be a pissant and tell people that they're jerks. But it's there and I'm grateful for it. Irritation in the sense that you touch this little tiny little creature to see if it's still alive and it moves. It's irritation to prove that you're still alive.
I would agree that not to do anything about it is practice with it.
Yes.
But also that there's some alchemy involved in doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my God. You're so fed by the energy going elsewhere than unpleasant expression. Oh God. Oof, I barely need to sleep. No, it's a tremendous source of energy.
If someone can stay calm and centered and in their being in the midst of somebody else having a really hard moment or a really irritated moment or whatever, I think that that informs the space very powerfully, and people get it. If somebody's in a real upset state, somebody can remain there observing and non-reactive. I think that that informs everyone. Oh, okay.
I would add that somehow you're benevolent to the person. In other words, you don't have a hostile expression on your face. You don't necessarily try to go hug them right away, but my attention is on you and I hear you, kind of a thing.